Good morning, and thank you everyone, or afternoon, my apologies, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, GP Tips and Tricks, What's New in Microsoft Dynamics GP 2015. I'm Megan Turco, and I will be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm just going to briefly go over how to use your webinar console. The orange arrow on the right side of your screen will let you toggle the control tray open or closed, and at the bottom of the control tray, you'll see a chat window. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar via that chat function. On your GoToWebinar console, you'll also see an area for your audio settings. If you're calling in through your telephone, please be sure to use the Use Telephone option. And alternatively, if you're using your computer speakers, please select the Use Mic and Speakers option. Additionally, I do want to note that this webinar is being recorded today, and we will send out the slides as well as the link to the on-demand recording within about 48 hours. So please keep an eye out for that message if you're interested in accessing the webinar after today. And with that, I would like to introduce today's featured speakers. We have David Maharg, who is the Senior Manager for Support and Upgrades here at Armanino. He leads the installation, upgrade, and support teams and has experience working alongside companies throughout the country to define best practices, design GP and other information systems, and implement those solutions as the lead architect and project manager. We also have Steve Chapman, Senior Account Executive for Armanino's Dynamics GP practice with us today. Steve has over 10 years of experience in business systems consulting and 25 years experience in management, accounting, and small to mid-sized businesses, mostly in construction, distribution, service, and technology industries. It's great to have you both with us today, and with that, I'm actually going to turn the presentation over to Steve to get us started.
Okay. So what we wanted to show you today were some new things that are coming out in GP 2015 and 2013 R2. Now, one thing Microsoft has done in the last year or so is they've increased the cadence of their releases. So you're going to see a lot more new features coming out of Microsoft on a regular basis. So what we're going to cover today are these improvements, and I kind of group them in control areas, reporting, productivity, and system administration. So we'll kind of take a look at that. We'll also take a look at some of the support cutoff dates on existing versions of GP and upgrade paths and processes for those versions. So let's get started. One of the new features here is, and this is a big one, it's workflow. So GP used to have workflow in SharePoint, and some of you may have tried that. It was problematic, to be nice. It was difficult to get to work, and it was didn't always work well. So what Dynamics came out with was a brand new workflow mechanism. It's built right within the product. It doesn't require SharePoint. And it's for specific objects in GP, and we'll take a look at those. The approval workflows are in basically these 5 areas: purchasing, payroll, financial, sales, and project. And they're all identified to specific objects, which means you can't really create your own. But there are plenty to take a look at, so we'll take a look at those. Also, one thing they've added too is that there's email approval, so that you can send an email out from Dynamics GP as part of the regular workflow process, and the recipient of that email can approve or reject that approval item without logging back into Dynamics GP or a website. They can do it right from their email. So that's going to be pretty handy, and a lot of people have been asking for that for years and years. So that will be very nice, and we'll take more of a look at this as we go forward here. So like I said, there's specific objects within GP that the workflow has been designed for, and you can see these right here. The first ones out were the purchase requisition and some payroll items and the project timesheet approval with the purchase order. So this is basic stuff. This has been out for almost 8 months probably. And with 2015, they released all the other ones here you can see on the right-hand side. So they're really expanding this rapidly. It's been pretty popular, so I think we'll see this rolled out to other objects within Dynamics GP. One of the new enhancements, which I really like in 2015, is there's some minor enhancements to the intercompany functionality within GP. And there's basically 2 of them. One is that when you create an intercompany transaction from, say, your parent company to a subsidiary company, within that subsidiary company, you can now view the entry back in the corporate entity, you can actually see the transaction there and get more information on that. Likewise, you can drill down from the originating entity and look at the distribution entity and see the transaction there. So that's going to be handy. It's going to cut down a lot of jumping back and forth. Another thing they can do too is that if you void an intercompany transaction in the originating company, it will also create a void transaction in the distribution company. So this will speed things up a little bit, it gives you a little more control and access to information between the companies. This is a little thing. It seems like it's not going to be a big deal, but I know that a lot of people have problems with this. This has to do with entering vendor invoices into Dynamics GP, because you can enter them two ways, basically. You can enter them through the payables transaction entry screen, or you can enter it through the purchasing system, assign it to a receipt. So what they've done in 2015 is they've added a warning to the payables transaction entry screen. If you add an invoice in the payables transaction entry screen and there's an outstanding receipt or an uninvoiced receipt in purchasing, you're going to get this warning. And you've got three options. Basically, you can continue, just bypass that, or you can actually go to those transactions. And if you hit go to, it'll go to a list of all those transactions that are causing that warning to come up. Or you could just hit cancel and the whole transaction will go away. So you've got those options. And again, this is pretty handy because it is common that people would, say for example, enter an invoice that was actually connected to a PO, but they'd enter it in payables transaction, and then it would cause duplicate problems, and it's just hard to fix. So this is going to streamline that quite a bit. And then going forward here, sorry, I seem to lost control. Okay, this is a big one. This was actually introduced in 2013 R2, and this gives you the ability to reverse a fiscal year. I would say that almost without exception, at the beginning of a new year when people were closing out their year and opening up a new one, after they ran the close process on the general ledger, there would always be a handful of customers that say, oh, I made a mistake, primarily because maybe I had a balance sheet account checked as a P&L or just the reverse of that. So there are ways to get around that, and you could change that, or some people had to send their whole database back to Microsoft to fix because it was that messed up. So now, with this new feature, you can actually do this yourself. You can reverse a fiscal year, and really what it does is just backs out the complete process. So it makes that year available for data entry, and then you can reclose it. And what I found is that you can actually, even if you've closed years in prior versions, prior to 2013 R2, you can still reverse those historical years if you want to. So this gives you a lot more flexibility. Obviously, you want to be careful on who you give access to this particular window. And it's actually part of the year-end closing routine. The same screen, there's just a little button down at the lower left-hand side there. You can see it called Reverse Historical Year. So it's pretty easy to do, and it will be quite handy for a lot of people. Microsoft continues to make improvements in the Refreshable Excel reports. Now, I use Refreshable Excel reports a lot to create dashboards for people, give people an idea what a more stable or a dashboard would look like. It's an easy way to get information out of GP and then format it in Excel and then use it over and over, putting more energy into this. And something they've done just recently is they've taken Smart List Designer and allow you not only to make new Smart Lists, but you can also publish those refreshable Excel reports. So this gives you a lot of ability to create new reports, the ability to use Smart List Designer and then move it to refreshable Excel reports. You do have to use a SQL view as the basis for that Smart List Designer report, but that's relatively easy to do, and there's lots of them that are available on the internet. So if you've been wanting to do that, this is a good chance to take a look at Smart List Designer, build some skills up there, and then you can just move it to refreshable Excel reports. It's easy to do. You can actually move the Smart List Designer reports right within that window. There's a little publish button at the top that will move it right to refreshable Excel reports. Similar to that, this is even back prior to 2013 R2, Microsoft came up with 4 ready-to-go dashboards, that are published in conjunction with the Refreshable Excel reports. Now there's 4 that are available. There's one in sales, one in inventory, purchasing, and finance. There's a couple reasons I like it. One is that out of the box, they're ready to go. They've got some nice graphics on there. You can drill down to the detail behind it. And you can see up in the upper right-hand corner of this, there's kind of a, I don't know if it's a slicer, but the slicer that allows you to specify the time period that you want all the related information to correspond to. So if you want to just look at 1 month, you can do that. If you want to look at, say, a quarter or even more, you can just move the slider. You'll get the corresponding changes in the graphs and the lists and charts below. So this is pretty handy. So that's one thing, nice out of the box, it's ready to go. But another thing, too, is it allows you to create your own additions to this dashboard. It'll also give you some tips on how to create dashboards. So the ability to create dashboards in GP has been there for a long time, but I found that a lot of people aren't really doing it. This will make it a lot easier to get started, get your feet wet, and try it out. And it's definitely something that you should deploy. If you haven't deployed Refreshable Excel reports, this is a good time to do it in 2013 R2 or above, because you'll like these dashboards, and there's a lot of value in those. One of the big changes in 2013 R2 was the introduction of purchase requisition within Dynamics GP. This replaced the purchase requisition functionality that was in Business Portal. Business Portal is being discontinued, and what they've done is they've taken the purchase requisition function that's right within the Dynamics user interface. It's in the purchasing area and allows you to create purchase requisitions, and there's workflow attached to that so that you can design your own workflow for approval. And then once it's approved, you can just turn this into a PO. So there's a couple of advantages here. It's one, it's in the user interface, whether it's a client-server user interface or it's the new web interface. You'll have that purchase requisition functionality there. Also, you can attach documents to the purchase requisition, which was something you could not do in the Business Portal version of this. So you can attach documents that support the purchase requisition, and then that will go along with the approval hierarchy so that people that are in the approval chain can see all the documentation that you want. There's a new license that's being introduced that is called SelfService. The SelfService user allows you to take advantage of a number of things, one of which is the purchase requisition functionality. And this is kind of a nice functionality in GP that was introduced. You've always been able to attach documents to records, whether they're transaction records or master file records. But with this new functionality, you can actually scan directly from your scanner, and it will be indexed, it will be scanned, and then it will be attached to this particular record in Dynamics GP. So this cuts out at least 2 steps, right? It makes it a lot easier to do. You can just go into the transaction or the master file record and say, I want to scan this item. If you've got a scanner attached to your workstation, you'll scan it, it will index it, it'll put it in the Dynamics database, and you'll have it connected to that particular record. So this is pretty handy. Plus, they've made changes in the attachment functionality overall, and there's an ability to, there's actually a little utility that will convert the OLE notes into this new document attachment functionality within GP. So you don't have to worry that you've got all these OLE notes and attachments under the old method. This utility should take all those and kind of convert them to the new methodology. And this is one that I like a lot, and a lot of people like it, is the ability to copy and paste into the General Ledger transaction screen in Dynamics GP. So what this allows you to do is just you can have a GL journal entry transaction information in Excel, and you just copy and paste in Excel, and then what you do is you go to the transaction entry screen that you see here, and you just click the little button that says paste. It'll take all that information and fill it into the grid in that particular transaction entry screen. Because it's in the transaction, it actually goes through all the validations that are necessary for that particular screen. And the format is really quite easy. It's just basically 4 columns. You've got the description, the account number, debit, and credit. And this can be in Excel. It can be in a CSV file. I've even done it from just a regular text file. So it's pretty easy just to copy and then just paste it into the journal entry. And then there's some system-wide features that were introduced in GP 2015, and some in 2013 are too. And one has to do with the ability to integrate into GP. They refer to it as the service-based architecture. And really what it does is it is in addition to eConnect, it allows you to easily create integrations into the Dynamics database. It's kind of a newer method. It's easier to do for programmers. So this will allow you to more easily make integrations with Dynamics GP. They've also introduced identity management or single sign-on if you're using Azure. If you're using Dynamics in Azure, you just need to log in once, and it will log you into Azure, but also into Dynamics GP. So people that are using Azure or Office 365, it gives you a lot more flexibility, and it's a little easier to log into the system. We've already talked about some of the SmartList Designer changes, and also in Management Reporter, they've actually put navigation right within GP, so you can pop out to it right from GP. And there's some other ability to copy home pages if you need to do that. If you've got new users are starting and they want to use home page similar to others in your system, you can easily copy those and move them over to new users. And then what I want to do is just kind of show you all the features. We covered a few of them, but there's a lot of features. Some of them kind of small, but some of them may be important to you. So I just gave you a list of all the features that are somewhat significant in the new releases. Some of them here, for example, the customer combiner and modifier and the vendor combiner and modifier used to only be available in the professional service tools library. That's now available within the application. You can go to the sales area or the purchasing area. You can do those functions right within the application. So these are the financials ones, and then there's quite a few in distribution here. One that I like a lot is the ability to assign an item to multiple sites at once. So if you're adding an item, if you do that, you know that you've got to assign it to a particular warehouse or more, and usually it's a one-by-one to do. They have to do one at a time. So if you've got a lot of warehouses, that can take you a lot of time. There's this new screen that's available that allows you to assign an item to multiple sites. So if you've got 20 warehouses or more, this makes it quite easy to do that function within GP. Also, if you're using the encumbrance area, there's some new SSRS reports having to do with encumbrances. They're actually pretty good looking. It takes all the information for encumbrances, which is basically the actual information, budget information, and the variances, and the encumbered amount, and it shows you in one nice report. So if you're using that, you should really take a look at adding SSRS to your reports, because it's a pretty handy tool to use. And as I mentioned before, Business Portal is going away, so there's a lot of the functionality that was in Business Portal is now being picked up in the regular UI, which is the client server or the web app. We looked at purchase requisition. Another one is project time in project time workflow. Now you can enter that within the application, and it uses the new workflow functionality to manage that for approval. And then if you're using Payroll and Human Resources, there's a number of new windows that are available. And again, some of these are going to replace some of the Business Portal applications. But you can see them here, they're listed here, and there's a new, as I mentioned, there's a new self-serve user that allows employees to log into GP and do these types of things, like change your W-4 information, whatever they need to do. It's available in GP. They can now do that with the new self-serve user functionality. And there's a number of changes that they've made in the business intelligence area. There's, we talked a little bit about the Refreshable Excel reports. There's continue to be more and more SSRS reports that are available out of the box. So if you're not using SSRS right now, you should really look into that because it's easy to add to your system. I think once you use it, you'll find that it's really pretty easy to use, and they're nice looking reports. And the web client has been almost fully rolled out now. So the web client is available in all these modules, and it's virtually everything at this point. So if you need a web client for your GP system, it's available, and it's almost fully functional. And again, these are the total workflows that are now available up to 2015. And these are some more of the self-service windows that are available in GP. I think I'm going to hand it over to David to kind of wrap up here with some of the support cutoffs and migrations.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to point out some of the important dates that you want to be thinking about. If you are on GP9 or GP10, that product did go out of mainstream support a few years ago at this point, and then in version 2010 it will actually go off mainstream support in October of this year. So the idea behind this is that if you would like to stay on a supported version of GP, and that doesn't mean you have to, but if you want to be on a supported version, a technically supported version, then you might consider doing an upgrade. GP 2013 will be out there for a while longer, and it's looking very, very good. If you're on the release to market version or the first 2 service packs of GP 2013, you might consider going to R2. R2 introduces some beautiful new user interface changes with a ribbon on the windows and some nice icons and just a better look and feel, we think. And then 2015 improves upon that and takes everything in that direction, and it looks very, very good. So 2015 will have mainstream support through 2020. So if you upgrade today, then you are in pretty good shape for the next handful of years. It really is a nice new approach. So I'd encourage you to think about it. If you typically do want to stay on mainstream support so that if we do have to involve Microsoft on a support issue, they're willing to talk to us. So that's really the key thing. Now, Armanino will support you on any of your versions as best we can. So so that means if you're on version 7.5 and a couple of you are, then we'll continue to support you as best we can. It's just if we have to involve Microsoft, we could run into some issues there. So we just want to encourage you all to consider maintaining at least being on a mainstream support version. Now your upgrade paths, if you'd like to advance to the next slide, let's take a look at that. Those of you who are on version 9, for example, we're going to have to do some service pack adaptations and get you on various levels. We're going to have to migrate you through various levels to get you up to 2015. So in many instances, we have to be at a specific service pack level in order to take you to the next version. So we do have to consider that. So these will give you some ideas if you want to look at your specific service pack levels or your what we call build levels. You can certainly do so by looking at the About Dynamics GP in the help window there. That'll give you what build you are. And then we can take a look at that and we can determine exactly what service pack you're on and then determine whether or not you're going to need one of these intermediary steps. So we can take you directly from version 2010, for example. If you're on SP4, we can take you directly to 2015. So that's a good thing. If you're on 2013, we need to get you up to R2 probably first and then take you to 2015 from there. And of course, if you're on 2013 R2, it's a very simple application of code to get you up to 2015. So I just want to leave these up on the screen for just a couple of minutes, or 1 minute at least, to give you an idea of overlaying where you are today and determine the levels we're going to need to do. Some of the things that we consider when we do upgrades are what service pack you're on, of course. We have to determine how many databases you have. We have to determine the intermediary steps to the intermediary versions. In some cases, we have to worry about what versions of SQL you're on. But we can take care of all that, and we can advise you in exactly what needs to be done to get your particular situation upgraded to 2015. Now, the other consideration we need to think about are third-party products. Third-party products are being released every week. We're hearing new releases of 2015 compatible code. So I want you to think about your third-party products. If you have a relationship with them, you can certainly give them a call. We do that on your behalf. If we're doing an upgrade for you, we'll call all your third parties and confirm that they have a 2015 compatible code. But as Microsoft releases a new version, it does take several weeks in some cases, and then it could be longer in other cases before a third-party vendor will release code that's compatible with 2015. We see a lot of them today. McCorm is out there. There's just a lot of them are out there that already have 2015 code. So we take your particular situation and we give them, your vendors, a call and find out exactly where they stand. 2013 R2 is a viable alternative. If your third parties aren't quite ready yet for 2015, we can take you to 2013 R2. It's a wonderful tool. It gives you that document attach feature and the scan and all that. It doesn't give you all the workflow features, which would be kind of nice to have, I would imagine, but it does give you some. It gives you the purchase rec and the purchasing workflow. So I would think that if you are on an old version of GP, even if you can't quite go to 2015 right now, you might consider going to 2013 R2, and then the 2015 upgrade later would be relatively simple. So I wanted to give you my contact info. If you want to discuss an upgrade with me, what I'll do, the process would be that I would send you a script. You run that against your SQL database, and that's going to give me a bunch of data points that I can use to help prepare a statement of work or at least a cost estimate. One of the other things we look at is your dynamics.set file, so we can see what sort of third-party products are involved or what modules you are deploying, and we can confirm everything's good there. Between those two things, I can turn a first cut, what I call it, a first cut of an upgrade proposal or upgrade estimate fairly quickly and give you an idea of what the cost might be, and then we'll go through that together, determine whether I've got the right components, and then I'll turn around a full statement of work after that. So I'd encourage you to give me a holler and shoot me an email, give me a call, whichever you prefer, and we'll get you going on your 2015 upgrade adventure. So Megan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, David and Steve. That was great. And we do have a couple minutes here for all of the great questions we've been getting in. Thank you all for submitting questions. Feel free to continue submitting them as we do the Q&A. If there are any that we don't get to today, we will definitely follow up with you offline. So the first question is actually, is SmartList Designer the same as SmartList Builder?
I can take that one. And no, it's not. It's a different product. What Microsoft did is they took SmartList Builder and they returned it back to the original developer, which was E1 Solutions. E1 Solutions continues to develop that product and has a lot of functionality. SmartList Designer is from Microsoft. It's within the standard licensing in GP, and it does a lot of the similar functionality. It allows you to create your own smart lists. There's a number of things it doesn't do, but if you want to create your own and you want to publish them to Excel reports, it does that easily.
Okay. And Steve, sort of early on in your portion of the presentation today, you mentioned a scan function. Is the scan function available in sales as well? Yeah, that should be available in the sales transaction entry screen. It's in a lot of the transaction screens already, and sales transaction is one of them.
Now, if I can interject, I want to make sure people frame this correctly. The GP application has to sense that your machine has a scanner attached to it. So it's not, I don't want to set the hopes of a network scanner, because that's probably not going to work. But if you have a physically a scanner attached to your machine and GP can sense it, then that button will light up and allow you to use it.
Thank you. Let's see. Actually, we just got another one in that has to do with SmartList. So I'll go back to that one since you guys were just talking about SmartList before. In previous versions, this particular questioner is on GP10. It says it was difficult to build SmartList because of a lack of access to the database and various named data fields. Has that been adjusted or improved in any way with the newer features or the newer releases?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. No, the field names haven't really changed. They're still a little bit cryptic. You do need to use the data dictionary in GP to find out which fields that you want. And depending on your system, there's a lot of security, SQL security. It's built in for a reason, so that people just have access to the data they want. So those two areas really haven't changed much.
Now there is an advantage to, I mean, both Smart List Builder and Smart List Designer do a translation. You're not looking at the raw field names very often at all. So it is doing a translation to a somewhat friendly name. So that's a good thing for sure. Another nice thing is that Smart List Builder and Smart List Designer both, you can build your own SQL views, and you can then do Smart Lists based upon views. And that can give you a tremendous amount of flexibility as far as building out a Smart List that may not be available out of the box or may be more difficult to create using Smart List Designer or Smart List Builder. You can actually do it in SQL and then enable the view to be accessible with those tools. But there are, as Steve is indicating, there are some security thoughts around that you do have to enable access to those views in order to be able to utilize them in the tool. But it is a security setting. That's it.
Great. So this one should maybe a quick one, hopefully. Do you know when Service Pack 1 will be released?
We anticipate it in the April timeframe. The Service Pack 1 came out in April for GP 2013, and so we fully anticipate it to be very similar. Microsoft, as you can imagine, knows that many customers are not going to do an upgrade until Service Pack 1 comes out. So I'm sure that they have, they're incentivized, if you will, to release Service Pack 1. They do have one hotfix out, but they have not yet released the full Service Pack. But I do anticipate that in the April timeframe.
Okay. I think we've got time for just about one more question. So what are some of the variables that will impact the cost of an upgrade?
That's a good question. There's one thing we haven't talked about yet is the move to Management Reporter. That started back in 2010, version 2010. You could move to Management Reporter. 2013 then stopped support for FRX, and then 2015, of course, does not support FRX either. And that's the technical out-of-the-box rule of thumb. You do need to move to Management Reporter. So that does impact the cost of an upgrade. It's not just an upgrade anymore. There's also a conversion, if you will, from FRX over to MR. And that can actually be a big variable because some customers have just 5 or 6 reports that they use on a regular basis, and some customers have over 100 FRX reports. And those FRX reports do need to be touched. Every single one has to be touched and opened and analyzed for syntax compatibility. So it's not a no-brainer, but it just needs to be done. So you do need to go through and touch each report and confirm that it's compatible with the new Management Reporter. So that is one element. The other major peak components of an upgrade cost are typically the size of your database. If you are 10 gigs in size, that's one thing. But if you're over 200 or 300 gigs in size, and we do have customers who have that, that could take a long time. And the longer it takes to do a particular upgrade process, then there are more services associated with that. Another factor is the number of databases you have. We have customers that just have 1 or 2 databases, and that's a fairly straightforward process. We just go in and do it. But then we have customers who might have 60 to 80 or more company databases. Can you imagine that? That's quite a few. And each database, at a minimum, takes between 40 and 45 minutes to do the upgrade on. That's at a base. And then if you've got a very large database, of course, it can take hours. So you can just multiply that out. We don't, from an Armanino perspective, we don't bill you for elapsed time because we don't have to be there the entire time. What we will do is kick off an upgrade batch, and then we will just check in on it periodically. So that's a fortunate thing because it wouldn't be feasible or even practical to bill you for every single minute of the upgrade process. So we will kick it off, and then we'll just check on it occasionally, and at the end of the day, we only invoice you for any of the associated time that it took for our involvement. It's not the elapsed time.
Great, thank you. And I know we ran a little bit over today, so I appreciate everyone sticking with us. I wanted to make sure we got in as many of your questions as we could. So that actually wraps up our Q&A sessions. If you do have any specific questions, please feel free to contact Steve or David directly. Their contact information is up on the screen, and of course we will follow up with this slide deck, so you'll have it there as well. As you exit the webinar today, there's going to be a quick survey. Please definitely take a moment to let us know your thoughts on today's webinar. And thank you, Steve and David, and thank you all of our audience, and have a great afternoon.